Hello and welcome to a special episode of the Robot Wars History podcast. I'm your host for today, Luke, and today with me is Taz.
Hello.
Jack.
Hello.
And SpaceManiac.
Greetings, listeners.
And today we'll be looking at the interesting topic of lost Robot Wars media. So we'll be looking at lost pilots, lost shows that aired but then became lost, missing battles, and missing video games. Our main man here today, Space, has done probably vastly more research on this than anyone else. So I'll turn it over to him.
Before we begin though, I just wanted to say a big shout out to Blame It On Your Gay, because I said his videos essentially inspired pretty much all of us to get interested in lost media and whatnot. And I'm still a little salty that Robot Wars wasn't included at all in the Lost Game Show Iceberg that was just uploaded a few days ago. So there's that. But yes, there is a ton of Robot Wars media, and we can go onwards to the pilots. And interestingly enough, our first bit of Lost Robot Wars media actually takes place 2 years before Series 1, which is the 1995 UK Open competition, otherwise known as the first Robot Wars pilot. So this was at a time when essentially Robot Wars was created by Mark Thorpe, as then you might have recognised him from the first World Championship. And yes, they were trying to bring this show over to the UK. And particularly, Mentorn struck a deal with US Robot Wars' backer, Profile Records, and also contacted the BBC proposing this fancy new concept as a possible new television show. The BBC seemed pretty impressed by this idea, and so bankrolled a pilot to be produced in London. And several BBC executives, as well as a live crowd, would go on and watch the recording.
Yeah, so this live event it featured a number of robots. Primarily from the American Robot Wars, and probably some of the most notable ones were US Robot Wars champion War Machine, the Master, and Thor. Now, the Master and Thor battle is probably the only one here that most people listening will be familiar with, because it was actually featured in the show. But across the show and the first Great Wars VHS, there were some other snippets of footage seen. So, for example, the robotic soccer.
Yes, the first robotic soccer, which also, interestingly enough, featured 2 grunts. Yes, the first stock robot, yes, the one that everyone gets annoyed about for eliminating Barry. There are actually 2 of them, because Derek Foxwell realised there wasn't going to be enough competitors, and so he built a couple, including the 2 grunts, Eubank the mouse, and a few other robots we have absolutely no idea what they're called. So we're just going to refer to them as Pill Robot and Rabbit Robot. And yeah, as I said, first ever incarnation of robotic soccer, as well as a few battles, of course.
Yeah, so after it was aired, it was kind of shelved because there was a change of leadership in BBC Two. And yeah, that's kind of it when it comes to the story of it. Now, I think of all the pieces we talk about here, this is probably certainly among the least likely that we're going to see again.
Definitely, yeah.
There is something else I would like to add, actually, because this is almost a stop press little thing, but recently, a couple of days before this podcast in fact was filmed, we recently found out that Dominic Diamond of Game Master fame claimed to have actually hosted a version of the show before Jeremy Clarkson took charge of it. So whether or not he actually hosted this pilot or another pilot that we don't know of yet is another interesting little thing to note about this piece of lost media.
That is interesting. Potential Robot Wars pilot we don't know anything about.
Yeah, because there was no kind of mention of a presenter or anything like that during. It was literally just fight highlights, wasn't it? From what I understand, and from what we'd seen.
Yeah, I think the purpose of it really was just to kind of show the BBC execs like what this crazy thing called the Robot Wars is. That's
Definitely,
interesting.
Yeah.
Someone will definitely have to get in contact with that man.
Yeah, because you had your 1v1 fights, and then you also had, like I say, the robotic soccer, which I can only imagine inspired the trial during the early series of Robot Wars, and obviously then your other ones like Sumo as well, which may not have featured necessarily in the 1995 UK Open competition, but were definitely something that the BBC brought forward to the series.
Bit of symmetry there with the end of Robot Wars on BBC, which I believe was also motivated by a change of leadership in BBC, change of leadership in their top staff who didn't really like Robot Wars around Extreme 2 time. But yeah.
And one of the robots as well that competed in that competition, La Machine, was actually built by, or part of the team at least, were Greg Munson and Trey Roski, who they produced some other American show. I don't know, it's not one of those show BattleBots or something like that. But nice little bit of trivia information. I think it was held in San Francisco, was it? Yeah. And of course, that caught the eye then of the BBC, and we eventually got the first Wars of Robot Wars.
Yeah. So after the 1995 Robot Wars UK Open, obviously we get Robot Wars. It's a massive hit. Everyone loves it, and so obviously the Americans want a bit of the pie. So MTV was interested in putting together an American version of Robot Wars, and so they put together a pilot. Numerous bots from BattleBots were in attendance. The ones that ended up fighting were, I believe, Frenzy, Mauler, and I think the Mangulator and Spike were there. Yeah,
I believe so.
And it was the first time that the Series 4 Arena actually saw any use. And I think they only ended up putting together 2 battles, and ended with Frenzy beating Mauler, or Mauler beating Frenzy.
I think
Mauler beating Frenzy.
Mauler won it.
Mauler actually got revenge on Frenzy. On the subject of that, I think the only information we actually got from these battles came from Gearheads, the fabulous book that everyone should read about history of robot combat.
It's not very expensive. It's on Amazon, pretty cheap. You can get it.
Yeah, absolutely. So interestingly enough, the Mauler actually got revenge on Frenzy because, I said Frenzy beat the Mauler back in BattleBots, and it was all because Frenzy's spike came off his axe or hammer even, and essentially it was doomed to the spinner from that point onwards. Also, the Mauler's only Robot Wars battles because, of course, the First World Championship faux pas.
Yeah, and from what I understand, there were supposed to be 7, or there were at least 7 machines that auditioned for this pilot.
I believe it was. I think it was meant to be 8, but one of them dropped out, so they had to reduce it to just 4. So 3 of them missed out. I think it was Gettobot, Ramstein, and Mjolnir that didn't manage to get any battles, so they were just in attendance.
The annoying thing about that was that the Roboteers came because not only did they want to compete, obviously, but they were going to get paid for this. And as soon as they knocked it back down to 4 competitors, the robots that failed to, be selected didn't get paid. So all that cost of getting the robots there to watch some other robots compete, I'd be pretty pissed off by that.
Yeah, and I mean, we would get to see Frenzy and the Mangulator in the Series 4 War of Independence special. The Mauler, not so much. It was the same, I believe, the Mauler, the same version that also didn't get into the First World Championship. And then the other robot, Spike, I don't believe we ever saw again. But there's only very limited information on the robots, and we never saw it in Robot Wars again.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, its only battle was against the Mauler, where its dull head just completely got whipped off by Mauler, and Frenzy also decimated the Mangulator. So again, Mangulator probably lost its wheels again. So that's something interesting to point out. The only real mystery here is who was the 8th robot that was meant to compete before withdrawing. So if anyone has any more information on that, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, it's not the only occasion we'll cover here that has an unknown robot. But yeah, ultimately MTV did not decide to pick up the show. TNN would later, and that's where we got Extreme Warriors from. And we've not seen anything from this pilot. We've only really got pictures from the pits of the robots in attendance.
There is something that did end up happening. It was in Gearheads. It was a miscommunication with flights with the Mauler team, and I can't remember what it was, but I think they had a miscommunication with the flights, and Morgan Tilford ended up missing some exams because he had to fly back to the United States for some exams, but he ended up missing them because of a botch in the flights.
Yeah, it was a bit of a mess up really with timing, and there were some unfortunate consequences to that. But yeah, that was the MTV pilot. Obviously, it never ended up being held on MTV. Robot Wars, I believe it was TNN that held what would become Extreme Warriors, and also Grand Champions.
I'm still kind of interested how they went with MTV as the original channel for American Robot Wars.
Well, let's face it, MTV is not about music anymore. It wasn't even about music back then. Yeah, it was pretty much action-orientated MTV back then, because I think they also hosted their own wrestling program a few years later, which was all, action-packed, explosions and destruction and all that. So, to be fair, I don't think a Robot Wars spin-off there would have been the worst of choices. On another little actual added note here is that Robot Wars was actually approached by Comedy Central before Comedy Central approached BattleBots. But I think it was, I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head.
Oh, it was that fella, wasn't it? What's his name?
Yeah, we just lost his name. But yeah, one of the more prominent mentor producers. And he actually rejected it because Robot Wars, and I quote, is not a comedy show. And that's why Viacom picked it up instead. Because I think the two guys that did it, Albie Hecht and Kevin Kay, actually watched the pilot and felt they would complement the WWF War is War audience. So yes, the robotics and wrestling era, so to speak.
Yeah, I believe it was Tom Gutteridge is the person's name. Yeah, he was a fella that he works on BattleBots now, doesn't he? He's one of the leading producers there. But he was director and producer who founded Mentor, I believe, and went on to kind of propose the idea of Robot Wars, and was very much a driving force between the 1995 competition. Yeah, but yeah, so that was that, and
yeah. So then, in the lead up to, then 2016 comes around. Robot Wars is announced; it's coming back, and the problem is, Robot Wars is a very, very unique show if you think about it. There's not many other shows that put the same kind of demands on production crew. And so it was decided to run a pilot which would basically act as a trial run for the production team to practice shooting a show like Robot Wars. Among some of the bots in attendance were Beta, under its UK name Basher, and former UK champs Turbulence and Kapow.
Yeah, this was quite the interesting little pilot actually, because as I said, I don't think we actually saw all 8 competitors ever actually appear on the show itself. So
I don't think the majority.
No.
The majority of them didn't. No, unless you count Viper.
No, I don't think any of them did. I mean, we saw them, for example, Merlin, a shot of Merlin from Alan Young of Apollo fame, getting sawed by Dead Metal in the CPZ over the flame pit. But aside from that, we saw snippets, but not fights in general.
yeah, so a few little interesting highlights that actually occurred at the pilot. Did you know that Razor was not the first to make the mistake of teetering over the pit? Because Basher tried to pit Tanto, succeeded, and ended up pushing itself in. So, yeah, that was the only battle you'll ever see of Basher in Robot Wars. Well, actually, you won't see it because the pilot, unfortunately, isn't available. And Kapow actually lost a few of its head-to-head battles, but somehow ended up in the heat final because of time constraints. And overall, in the end, Turbulence got to essentially win the crown. So yeah, Turbulence, the Series 8 pilot champion.
Indeed.
Mm.
And the arena, as I believe, wasn't necessarily in a fully finished state. The pit hadn't been, like, the edges of the pit hadn't been drawn on yet. It was very much like the like what I would assume the arena would look like for the MTV pilots. Because if it was anything like the War of Independence, then I believe the floor flipper and the pit weren't painted yet. The arena looked in a very kind of unfinished state, at least for the first few fights. So very similar to that there. The arena wasn't fully, as you would sort, TV ready, I suppose, at this stage. But yeah, it was Turbulence. It was your winner.
So, is there any footage or images available of this pilot?
There is. There's I think 2 images. There's one of the arena, and there's one of Dara O'Brien interviewing the Turbulence team, I believe. But that's the only 2 pictures that we've got of it.
I think there is another picture of Dead Metal cutting into Merlin, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, that bit was in Merlin's fight against Kapow, where Merlin ended up winning. And yeah, that footage, I believe it was in the introductions to the main series, but obviously we never saw Merlin competing.
There's 2 minutes of footage shot behind the scenes by Team Torvon. There's no battle footage. I don't want to say, if we ever did see this pilot, I can't imagine how, given the state of editing in Series 8, I'd almost dread to see it. Entire screen might just be red.
Yeah, just red. Yeah. Well, as I said, it's a few extra battles, so we can't exactly be too upset to see it really. So
yeah, and it's
and
a lot of the bots in attendance too. Like I said, some of them are previous UK champions, but kind of fell afoul of the fact that the producers didn't want too many flippers in. So would have been our only opportunity to see some of the higher tier robots of the live scene in the arena.
Yeah.
Because we had 8 robots, didn't we? But Rafe, who I'm not sure who the team was behind that, but they had to withdraw. In fact, it was the Armageddon team from Series 3.
Yeah, one of the members at least.
Yeah.
It's just in really strange connections. Almost it's the same series as the General going back. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow. But yeah, no, it had to withdraw before its first melee due to an internal fire. So.
Yeah, it would have been a nice inclusion on one of the. Home media releases of Series 8, but from what I understand, they were pretty scanty on special features and nothing they had in the in fact. So.
Yeah, it would have been really nice to have this as like a DVD exclusive or something like that. Because I know the old Robot Wars DVDs, the Kill Lot 1, Hypnodisc Razor Chaos 2, they all had the kind of special features, didn't they? And that were unique to those DVDs. But you really didn't get that in the ones that we got for the reboot series. You barely even got it in HD.
Yeah. So that kind of does it. That kind of does it as far as missing pilots goes. Next, we're going to move on to shows that actually did make it to air, but for one reason or another, we simply don't have access to anymore. And the first one is actually an entire series of Robot Wars. Robot Wars Revealed. Airing on BBC Choice in 1998, Robot Wars Revealed gave you a behind-the-scenes look at Series 2. So you'd have video diaries of the competitors putting their machines together. You'd have behind the stage like scenes of the trials and the battles. And there were 14 episodes produced, I believe. But of the 2, we've only currently got 2 for Heat I and Heat G.
Yep, as I said, this is a hardcore fan's wet dream. As I said, see, it's just all this extra content that, unfortunately, we're probably not going to see the light of day of because, and I think King Buxton's Simon Harrison really summed this up because, as I said, this wasn't included on BBC Two where everyone could watch it back then, analog or digital, but BBC Choice, which, as I said, back then digital channels were a luxury, a premium, so to speak, and so according to Simon Harrison, Robot Wars Revealed was designed to try and get some people to subscribe to BBC Choice and for us to get a digital box. But unfortunately, back then, very few people actually owned a box, and so not many people viewed it.
You were doing well if you had a digital box back then.
Recorded it. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, two of them. Yeah, the two that we have were recorded by John Denny of Steel Avenger and Simon Harrison of Kingby. I will say, of all the media we're going to cover here, I still do think this is easily the one we've got the best chance of getting, just because even if it aired on a very limited UK channel, it still aired on a UK channel, so...
Definitely.
You never know what you'll find on someone's VHS collection.
Yeah, I mean, the two heats that we have got access to, you've got Heat G, that's Roadblock's heat, isn't it? Who are the eventual winners of that heat, spoilers. And also Heat I, which is King Buxton's heat. Which obviously explains Simon Harrison's involvement with getting that revealed.
Yeah, I think it was Simon that first brought it to attention. I think it was in 2018, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and much unlike Series 2 itself, these were never re-aired on Challenge or anything like that, were they?
I don't think so. I said just exclusive things
definitely
that
not.
aired. Were they aired parallel to each episode, or were they filmed or were they broadcast a few weeks afterwards? I can't remember now.
I'd imagine parallel.
I believe. I don't know. Actually.
But you'd have to cross-reference listings.
There's an episode guide, and apparently episode 14 was aired all the way in 2000, which would have been parallel with Series 4.
That is strange.
Which, interesting enough, it could actually be a Series 4 one. We don't really know that. Because, as I say, that's just how obscure the show was.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with BBC Choice, it might have been that they just didn't have anything else to show. Possibly very low on programming, but... Yeah, I guess like I said, it's very obscure, so...
Sorry, I was just going to say, so the series itself, it was all kind of behind-the-scenes footage, wasn't it, of the pits and the making of the series, which is a little weird, because we did have a dedicated The Making of Robot Wars episode, didn't we?
Yeah. And interestingly, it was Philippa Forrester that presented it, not Craig Charles.
Yeah. Which was a refreshing change, but one that was unique to this series especially.
I mean, for all we know, Making of Robot Wars could easily have featured a lot of the footage originally shot for Robot Wars Revealed.
Yeah, that's possible.
Quite possibly.
Yeah, as I said, this was definitely, as Philip Forster said, it was absolutely the War Uncut versions, because you didn't even hear Jonathan Pierce's commentary in it. So this is the closest you'll get to see the War battles as well.
Yeah. I'm not sure there's too much else to say about Robot Wars Revealed, largely because we don't have a lot of it.
Something else to add as well is that, as I said, Team Berserk, I'm not sure if they actually got to have their own segment because they were in the Reserve 1, or actually Super Heavyweight Showdown, sorry. But they actually did have their own little behind-the-scenes program, but on a different program altogether. On the 13th March 1999 edition of See Here on Saturday, which is a program dedicated to deaf and hard of hearing viewers. And yeah, they had their own little interview on it, and yeah, a very special little one as well. And according to Stuart Ford as well, the producers did not actually bring in an interpreter for the team because they assumed that interpreters did their role free of charge. That's why the fourth member, Martin Kershaw, ended up stepping in for the role. Unfortunately, that version of CEO on Saturday is also not available at the moment.
Very deep levels of Lost Robot Wars media here. Yeah, so that's Robot Wars Revealed. A lot of it lost, but probably the one we've got the most hope of finding. This next one is unique because kind of unique because it's the only one that isn't even in the English language. Robot Wars The Kickoff was a special aired prior to the broadcast of the first series of the Dutch Robot Wars on the Dutch channel BNN Nederland 2. It basically served as an introduction to what Robot Wars was. So you had behind the scenes looks at the UK and Dutch Robot Wars. You he had interviews with people like Craig Charles, like a history of the robot wars in the UK, and kind of previews of the Dutch competitors.
Yeah, and again, as it was a one-time episode, as far as I'm aware, which wasn't repeated, at least over here.
I think it was actually re-aired quite a few. It was re-aired.
Oh, was it re-aired in the Netherlands? Was it?
Yeah, and then I mean, it wouldn't have seen light of day
right.
here.
Well, no, but yeah, it's been very difficult to get hold of, hasn't it? I mean, we still don't have it now, and it's been nearly 20 years.
Confirmation we got was actually from a few Dutch websites promoting the program. If we didn't have them, we would have absolutely no idea that this program even existed at all.
I have to imagine a limiter as well on getting it is the fact that obviously here you've got quite a fervent fandom for Robot Wars. I can't imagine any such equivalent exists in the Netherlands. So there's probably a lot fewer people with the capability of finding this thing that have the motivation to do so.
I guess so, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a prevalent hub of Dutch roboteers even now, but with regards to people, back in the day, there's not too many connections, unfortunately, anymore.
Yeah, there's no Dutch Robot Wars wiki.
But but yeah, it was presented by who would become the Dutch Robot Wars presenter, Rob Camphouse, I believe.
I don't know.
Campos. We need some Dutch people to tell us how that's pronounced. And Bridget Marsland, who served as pit reporter for the series. I'm not sure necessarily whether Bridget may have had a role similar to Philippa in Robot Wars Revealed. I'm not sure, but Rob definitely had a part to play as well in that.
And yeah, essentially it must have been a success because, as I said, a lot of people watched Series 1, otherwise there wouldn't have been a Series 2 of Dutch series.
True. It was definitely inherently more successful than the German one, which only got the one series. Interviews in the episode, as far as we're concerned, was with some UK competitors as well as Dutch competitors. Steve Clark, who served as designer of the sets and the arena. Chris Reynolds, who did the house robots. Bill Hobbins, who was producer at the time as well. Derek Foxwell, senior technical consultant, and obviously Craig Charles as well as Rob. So there was a fair few interviews going on that episode, and yeah, it's a bit of a shame really, even though it is in Dutch and likely you wouldn't understand it without translation. It's a bit of a shame that this hasn't resurfaced.
One thing I do wonder about is given that we've gotten this from kind of information from Dutch posters decades ago at this point, I do wonder about the fact of it being re-aired, because it doesn't... Typically specials like this, they're usually a one and done. They're a one and done kind of broadcast, so I do wonder if that's misremembering or something. Yeah, because that strikes me as very odd that this would be re-aired.
Possibly. I mean, if the whole series was maybe re-aired, then this may naturally have been aired as the kind of almost like episode 0, if that makes sense. I really don't know, to be honest. Hopefully we can get some insight on that in the future.
So that kind of does it for stuff that was aired but we have lost. And now we're moving on to something a bit different. We're moving on to missing battles. So these are battles that either were filmed but never made it to air, or battles that we've only seen very brief snippets of. Going chronologically, the first one we've got here is from the Series 2 grudge matches. Now, the Series 2 grudge match special, it had a lot of different weight class fights, but there's several that we only saw brief snippets of, or not at all. So featherweight, lightweight, middleweight, and the super heavyweight heats, we only saw a few seconds of them basically summing up what happened.
Yeah, it's an absolute tragedy, really, because no wonder, some of the, different weight category competitions suffered in later series because, as I said, we barely got to see any of the other weights. Yeah, it was such to the extent that it was only cut down to a few seconds, to the point where you could barely see some of the competitors whatsoever, like reckless endangerment. The only screenshot we've got of that is like a side of it. And we've also got some robots that didn't even actually appear on the show at all, like the featherweight championship competitors Anarchy and Deadline, and no, not that Anarchy, different Anarchy altogether. Scorpion from the middleweight competition, and even a lightweight robot that we don't even know its name, and it was only confirmed thanks to a screenshot provided by the Robot Wars technical manual. Some theorise this little mite was called Thump, based on the little text you can see there, but at the moment we haven't been able to confirm it.
Yeah, and thanks to how briefly highlighted these fights were as well, we don't even necessarily know how many robots were in each fight. Like, we've been under the impression from what we understood that there were 4 per heat, but it was actually Craig Danby who was part of Deadline, who let us know that there may well have been 5, even 6 robots per heat in some of the episodes. So, goodness knows if there are more robots out there that we just didn't see on camera.
Yeah. Don't understand why they didn't split into 2 episodes. Because you could have had the grudge matches, as its own separate thing, and then you could just have the mini weights or something like that, or in fact just call it Robot Rampage even for that matter.
Yeah, very much so. That would have been good. Would have been very good. But yeah, and then there were obviously your super heavyweights as well. Most notably, at least for me, the heavyweight Rotorok. I definitely not pronounced that right. Which
it's their own fault for choosing a stupid name.
It was an absolute unit of super heavyweight, 166 kilos and 2 meters long, and it damaged the arena, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, they had like a steam hammer or something that was spinning way out of control, and I think it just bowed. If I remember correctly, it bowed into the arena and took it out. So obviously that was very.
The only highlight of the fight as well is Rotorok making like a massive curve, like turning another turning circle of like Jupiter, and it was like turning presumably into the arena wall because it wasn't a very long fight. And yeah, they boasted actually on the team's websites that they were the first robot to be quote unquote banned from Robot Wars, which presumably was in reference to the incident.
Damn, what a dubious record that is.
Yeah, it's not one for the CV, is it?
Speaking of controversy, I believe it was the lightweight competition, where, or was it the featherweight? I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but the battle ended, and the judges wanted the robots to display movement to pick a winner. They picked a winner, and another team, one of the losing teams, wasn't exactly very happy with that, and a behind-the-scenes scuffle occurred.
That was lightweight, I believe, because it was Slippery Strana who won.
Yeah, and one of the unknown teams just took outrage to that for some reason. I mean, we don't have the battle, of course, so we don't know whether Slippery Strana deserved to win or not, but there we go.
Maybe we'd be talking about it in the same light as Tornado Razor if we knew.
Let's not go there.
Yeah.
Let's not go there.
I do, yeah, Space. I do agree. It would have been good if they could have aired the kind of separate weight classes as a single episode. I mean, honestly, I don't know, shove making a Robot Wars out on a VHS or something. Yeah, that's a good matches. Series 3, as Space related in his history of Series 3 controversy podcast, there was a ton of battles we were supposed to get that we didn't. One that did happen, but we don't have, is Behemoth versus Cerberus. For a long time, all we knew about this was that it happened because there was an image of it featured on a CD-ROM that came with I think it was the first edition of the Robot Wars magazine. We've later found out that this was kind of a friendly match just to kind of entertain the audience during a lull in filming. But apart from the fact that it happened, we don't really know much about it.
Yeah, we don't even know who won necessarily. I mean, from the image, it's quite clear that Behemoth's on the attack, lifting Cerberus into the arena wall. But it's, knowing Behemoth's record, unfortunately, it's no guarantee that it won that fight.
Yeah, it is possible, and Cerberus had quite a bit of luck of its own though, so yeah, could balance it out. Interestingly enough, I think this theoretically could have been one of the last battles of Series 3 in general, because this took place after the First World Championship. And we know this because Behemoth was crumpled in its battle against Cerberus, and that was caused by Razor.
Yeah, it was also sporting its England flags as well, the twin England flags on the back. And obviously it represented England in the First World Championship as well.
Yeah, so England versus Cyprus.
That massive rivalry.
Yeah, so after that we move into Extreme 1, an infamous wildcard Warriors bout between Hypnodisc and TX108. Now, according to which account you believe, Hypnodisc either did not move at all or very quickly broke down. And understandably, Hypnodisc had a pretty bum Extreme 1, so they thought probably best not to put this in. I've always felt this is a bit sad, because the Danbies have had a terrible time of it in robot combat shows, and they have a win over Hypnodisc, and it never even makes it to air.
Yeah. And Deadline never even made it to telly either.
I'm so glad this didn't actually air, because, as I said, this would have been almost a complete waste of time if it wasn't for the fact that a wild card actually won. As I said, we really didn't need to see Hypnodisc be embarrassed once again. I mean, wasn't Nasty Warrior enough? But yeah, as I said, it broke down just seconds before, or it actually did cause some damage to TX108 and just broke down again. We don't really know. According to Great Danby, it was the former, but yeah. Essentially, I don't understand what happened, but we never got to see a rematch for some reason. I think TX108 had technical issues, but again, Great Danby, of course, knows more than us, so let's ask him about that.
Given Hypnodisc's performance throughout Extreme, it may have been that this was one of those fights filmed after the main series, so by then Hypnodisc was just completely shot. There was nothing left. So that might be why we didn't get a rematch.
I believe it was also because of time constraints. I'm pretty sure Craig Danby actually said that himself. They were really behind on filming for that day especially. So we never did get a rematch of that, unfortunately.
It could have been aired during Extreme, because I know that Hypnodisc in Extreme did have a lot of electrical problems, and they managed to fix that for Series 5, because they said they had an electrical bug with the new Hypnodisc, and then they fixed it for Series 5, so maybe that was the cause.
Yeah, possibly. So yeah, there is actually another piece of Wildcard Warriors Lost Media as well to talk about, and that is Draven versus King Bee Powerworks. Now, I know what you're thinking. How is this lost media? We actually saw the battle take place. Well, believe it or not, one of the robots actually had a different name altogether in the original airing. Draven was supposed to be called Anthrax. And we actually, people from BBC Choice at least, got to see a version of the battle where Jonathan Pierce and co. referred to it as such. Unfortunately, there was an outbreak of anthrax in the United States at the time, and the BBC, frightened of controversy where controversy wasn't really going to take place at all, decided that maybe anthrax wasn't the best name in the world, and that's why we got Draven in the end. And we actually witnessed redone commentary from Jonathan Pierce, and all other references to anthrax be removed. And just like when it was revealed, I think so few people watched it that it didn't get recorded properly.
Yeah, I mean, you really got your money's worth if you had BBC Choice at the time, getting to witness this original commentary here from Jonathan Pierce. But yeah, we never heard of that again, because the commentary was all redone for that battle, with Anthrax obviously being called Draven from then on. I'm not sure. I wouldn't know without hearing the original commentary whether it was repeated word for word. But the commentary was redone for that battle, and so that it was seamless for the airing of Extreme 1.
So just to conclude Extreme as well, I wonder, because Craig Danby mentioned about the schedule and whatnot, I wonder if there were other battles that were dropped or changed in the end, because I said, as much as I love Extreme and I love Series 5, I said filming them together was an absolute disaster. As I said, Bulldog Breed and Atomic would agree with me on that. So it is interesting to speculate whether there were some other battles that were filmed but ultimately were not broadcast or were meant to be filmed but didn't.
I mean, we definitely know about the People's Challenge, for example. That was referenced in the Extreme. Was it
Extreme
called the
official
guide? That's the one, the official guide, where it mentions the People's Challenge, which the concept basically being that fans would vote in for robots that they would just want to see fight in a 1v1. And I believe the winners would have been Razor Hypnodisc, but neither team wanted it. And the idea was dropped regardless because of time constraints, presumably, as well as the fact that neither team really wanted it.
Yeah, I mean, getting your robot destroyed just for, like, entertainment, not really anything happening, not anything from it, just a one-off. It's not really worth it.
No, and after Hypnodisc had suffered losses to Nasty Warrior, TX-108, Behemoth, I'm not sure they were looking at Razor thinking, we've got him.
Yeah, I think they should have. I think Mentor should have offered a cash prize and maybe a trophy. That would have perhaps placated the teams, but maybe they were just deeming that Razor and Hypnodisc were going to meet each other at the end of Series 5, and well, Bigger Brother got in the way.
Yep.
So yeah.
Indeed.
Speaking of Hypnodisc, this is something else that we're just adding in the stop press essentially. For people that viewed YouTube in its early years, they might have remembered a weird little video featuring Hypnodisc back in the day, which was, I think it was titled Why Hypnodisc Can't Work in an Office. And me and Jack were searching for this little video, which involved Hypnodisc destroying a photocopier among other office equipment. And sadly, we just couldn't find it anywhere. So another piece of Hypnodisc lost media there. Hopefully its team might actually have the recording somewhere, but at the moment it's just not accessible.
Yeah, and one more thing, just in addition to the People's Challenge, another proposed event was Exhibition, which, at least according to the Robot Wars magazine, was something that just involved teams demonstrating the robot's capabilities through challenges that weren't necessarily related to combat. So in a sense, it was almost like kind of bringing back the trials in some extent. Examples were given as robots pulling like a Land Rover or flipping a car over, but inevitably we can presume that was never recorded. But again, that was another thing that was proposed for Extreme, but not done due to time constraints.
Yeah, I think there was actually a reference to it, indirect reference anyway, in the official guide for Extreme, because there was a bit of a segment that was saying that Really Big Cheese team boasted that they could lift a mini metro in the air or something like that. Now, I would have loved to have seen Really Big Cheese prove that.
Yeah, I think that was in anticipation as well for trying to take on To Kill a Lot. But the exhibition, as well as the People's Challenge, were both as well as all the other tournaments that actually did happen, were all mentioned by name in the Robot Wars magazine at the time.
Yeah, so moving on to Extreme 2, we have Robot Rampage. Now, thankfully by now, Robot was pretty good about showing most of the other weight classes. Not all of them, though. In Robot Rampage, we only, for featherweight and antweight, we only ever saw snippets of the battles aired.
Yeah, as I said, really the featherweights really got a tough deal, didn't they, until Series 7. Firstly, they only got a few seconds in Series 2, and then they only got a few seconds in Extreme 2.
Yeah, I mean, Robot Rampage. Oh God, I love Robot Rampage. It's it has one of the largest fields, I believe, of robots in the within an episode through the whole series. I think Grudge Match's episode is the only one that has more robots, which obviously showed other weight classes too. But understandably, with 35 robots being mentioned or at least shown on camera in the episode, you can understand that some of it would have been highlighted.
Yeah. So there are some highlights, of course, that were shown. Refbot pushing pretty much all the robots in and then falling in himself, for example. And I think one of the robots was even thrown out of the arena by security.
It was.
Yeah, that was Gianto, which is the third mention of Craig Danby's robots.
Wow, Craig Danby really was unlucky, wasn't he? Most of his battles before the reboot series just barely got ahead.
It just got dropped out and it just broke as soon as it hit the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your first, it was two, I believe, 6-way melees between the fights. The first one you had Gladiator, Kitty, Micromute, Flybot, Dragon, and Cutlet. And you could see in the highlight there that I think it was Flybot and Kitty that were playing close to the pit, and then both ended up falling in. And then in the other one, you had Gianto, Catnip, who was from the, as well as Kitty from the Pussycat team, Arg from Repteron, Bernard, AMCVN, who was from the CV team, Neoteric from the Ripper team, and Eddie Evolution. Again, the robots that didn't progress from this melee weren't necessarily seen too much, but it was the final really that was the one that was shown in full.
I wonder how miffed the teams whose robots didn't get shown that much were when Eddie's little pink bot got more priority over them. I mean, it was an entertaining battle, but still, it's just bizarre how empty the lightweight division was at the time.
Yeah, and it was so funny just to see the lightweights all in the massive heavyweight arena as well. I mean, the outweights, yes, they got their own little arena, but God, the lightweights in that heavyweight arena, they did not fit. We were also supposed to have the return of super heavyweights. Again, it's something that we presume never happened. We've not heard of any super heavyweights that applied for it, but it's called the Super Heavyweight Knockdown, which was the official announcement on what was then the Robot Wars forum, which would have had even more robots than 35. But yeah, again, that was something that just never came to be. No, unfortunately not. And obviously as well, because this would have been, at least through the featherweights, this would have been, I believe, the first time we'd have seen anything from Team Roman Robots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, no, I'm thinking of T-Bone, aren't I? T-Bone was the first one from John Finlay. But Neoteric was very interesting as well.
It was also much larger than
those. Oh, was it? Interesting.
Yeah, it was a featherweight walkabout. It weighed 24 kilos. It was a walkabout, and just it was noticeably larger than all the other featherweights.
Oh yeah, but
in its heat.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was the one that Sergeant Bash messed it up, and Ezekiel Lot dumped it. But yeah, it was a shame because I'm trying to think now of other walker robots. I mean, obviously you've got Mammoth, but in lower weight classes, and it's a shame that Neoteric never really got referenced as such.
Moving on from the classic series, we move into reboot series, and we do have some missing battles here. Now, none of these battles were really intended to ever air. They were just really meant for those in attendance. But during Series 8 and 9, there were a number of whiteboard matches put on. These include bots like Eruption, which fought Infernal Contraption and Shockwave, as well as a third, what would have been, I guess, a second fight with Behemoth. Behemoth versus Gabriel, which happened twice, and Behemoth versus TR2. That was the only one we saw, featuring Dara O'Brien and Angela Scanlon with the robots. I think one of these matches, I think it was Behemoth versus Gabriel that was filmed and released on YouTube, or one of their matchups.
I believe so, yeah. I remember seeing that on YouTube. And also, interestingly, Turbulence was also part of one of the whiteboard matches, being the only robot from the pilot to also feature here in a whiteboard match. it fought Infernal Contraption.
Interesting enough as well, I said Infernal Contraption defeated a champion. Yeah, as it turns out. I mean, Infernal Contraption does get a bad name, but yeah, it did beat a champion as Turbulence lost its removable link in the match. And we also witnessed, well, we could have witnessed as well, another out of the arena because Eruption added to its count by throwing out Shockwave.
Yeah, and also interestingly, in one of the two, I believe, Behemoth versus Gabriel fights, one of the battles had to go to an audience decision. I'm not sure whether the judges were present for this or not. Even though I know it would have been whiteboards, but yeah, there was an audience present for these fights, which is why we've got footage of Behemoth and Gabriel, but it ended up being only the third example of an audience decision in Robot Wars.
Yeah, it must have been. And yeah, as I said, Behemoth never actually got to avenge its loss at all because, as I said, Series 9 tried to get revenge on, its loss to Shell by trying to beat Gabriel. I think both ended up in the pit, and yeah, it was declared a draw. I think Eruption also faced Infernal Contraption, and it was actually a surprisingly competitive battle, but as I said, Eruption got the win in the end.
Yeah, and I think this was one that flip that Eruption got on Infernal Contraption was part of the intro, wasn't it, for the series? But obviously both Robots Eruption and Infernal Contraption would both compete in Series 8, but Infernal Contraption wouldn't repeat the same success, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think this is among the ones we've covered. This is also definitely in the category of the most hopeful. Just because it took place in an era where everyone in attendance pretty much could film. That's why we've got Behemoth versus Gabriel, and we're not just relegated to a single image like we have Behemoth versus Cerberus.
There was enough of an audience as well to have them judge the fight. So you'd like to think that there may be one or two people that snuck their phones out to record a fight or two.
Yeah, so if you're listening and you're in the audience of Series 8 and 9, before you go throwing out that old iPhone, just have a look through your gallery, see if you've got any footage.
See if you've got the KO hit of Infernal Contraption on on Turbulence. We'd really like to see that.
And the Audi Arena.
I think it's speak for everyone there.
Oh yeah,
that too.
Just on a quick note before I move on to the video game content, since we're discussing events that didn't happen, Series 10 famously meant to have a featherweight championship that was ultimately cancelled, and so sadly we never got to see friend of the channel, Tale of the Toasters, amazing but tragic roundabout ever make it to screen.
Oh, that's tragic.
Sad.
Literally. Anyhow,
so yeah. that takes us on to video game content, and I know Jack is the resident in-house expert on this, so take it away.
That is a bold title you've given me there, Luke. Robot Wars Arenas of Destruction, more so than any of the other video games, had a fair few prototype releases and build versions that featured several features, be it robots, be it weaponry, and other features of the game that were either scrapped or just not present in those early releases, and subsequently weren't were different to what we ended up getting in the final release of Arenas of Destruction. So starting from the top, we've actually got 6 robots here that were prototype robots, fictional robots of course, which were present in different build versions of Arenas of Destruction, but were scrapped prior to the game's official release. Now, first of which we've got Roadblock, which I know what you're thinking, Roadblock Series 1, gotta be in there. No, this was a different version of Roadblock. This was a wooden wedge-shaped robot, very, very similar to My First Robot, if you know that one. I believe that was may well have been called My First Bot, actually. And it was very similar in design to that, which was a robot that you were kind of given at the start of the game, so you had something to play with. But interestingly though, although I've said there was no relation really, there actually was some unused textures the game's files that were quite evidently relating to the Series 1 champion. Now, we've got a top panel texture, a front wedge texture, the bit that says 200 yards, and also side armour. So it's quite evident that Roadblock itself, even though that the Arenas of Destruction was based on Series 4, that the actual Roadblock robot was supposed to be in the game. And then otherwise you've got robots called Pencil of Death, you've got Torture Chamber, which had a flamethrower, so it was a play on words. You also had Silver Bullet, you had Techno Masher, and Bob.
Yeah, Bob. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, so interesting enough, just to make sure, to give clarification, when we say Techno Masher, we don't mean the oddly shaped flamethrower machine. This was a very different design which just had a few spikes, and it was called Techno, Techno, not Tekno Masher, which was pretty odd.
Yeah, and it was all one word as well, which wasn't the case in the actual robot's name. But yeah, so those were 6 robots that were in the prototype version. You could play as them. Interestingly, I believe Bob, it was blue in its official thing, and it had a big axe on the top and the spikes. There are pictures available of it, and but it would change colour if in some different, in different circumstances. I'm not sure exactly what those circumstances were. I believe was it Space or Taz that was one of you two was working on that and made that discovery.
Yeah, so I actually added Bob to a match against Roadblock, and yeah, it was just a weird little colour. So I'm not sure if it had anything to do with debugging the paint schemes, which I don't think were working that well back then. But yeah, I said Bob did its job, and we salute you, Bob, because I said it actually appeared later than the other prototype robots, and it was actually removed earlier than the others, which was pretty odd.
Yeah, and thinking about it as well, there actually are 2 more fictional robots. I know I said 6, but there are actually 8. 2 of which were only referenced by commentary lines that Jonathan Pierce did for the game, which were inevitably not used. But these 2 robots, Triple Shooter and Robot Ali, presumably based on Muhammad Ali there, were fictional competitors that were referenced by name. They had their own introductions, but were never present in any of the build versions that were available.
Yeah, I wonder whether Robot Ali was a reference to Cassius, since I'm guessing Rex Scarrold wasn't going to give permission to use Cassius again after the Series 3 controversies. But I think you mentioned this before, Jack. Wasn't there a reference to a boxing glove as well, which it might have equipped?
There was. Now there was a fair few kind of like miscellaneous components and things like that, and also weapons that were unused in the final game. One of which was indeed a boxing glove. So although it's not confirmed, we don't know what Robot Ali or Trouble Shooter look like. It can be presumably assumed that Robot Ali may well have had a boxing glove or anything like that. Interestingly as well, with the Cassius comparisons, I don't know if you remember the flippers that were there in the Arenas of Destruction game, but there were front hinge flippers, weren't there? And one of them was very reminiscent of Cassius and Cassius 2.
Indeed, which was quite interesting enough.
Yeah, but again, nothing confirmed. And Troubleshooter shooting, that may well have been play on words.
And I think
one of the weapons.
There is actually some commentary that Jonathan Pierce did for the liquid nitrogen gun, because I can remember listening to it on another video.
Yeah, I haven't got that on me right now, but he definitely did do commentary lines for a lot of the stuff. That's how we've come to realise that there was a fair bit of cut content from Arenas of Destruction, unfortunately. I think may well have made the game a bit better.
I think he just says something like, "Oh, out squirts the liquid nitrogen." I think that's the line.
Yeah, and there was also a taser, which I believe we saw in Extreme Destruction.
Yeah.
And there were also unused commentary lines again revealing tag team tournaments. Now in the Hamburg Dockyard, there was supposed to be a tournament called the Dockyard Double. Now, double, as you might interpret, as a tag team tournament, a 2v2 if you like. Commentary lines definitely indicated that was the case. And another one was Scrapyard Assault from the Sao Paulo Scrapyard Arena. Now again, I don't have the lines on me unfortunately, but they are part of a larger video that has every single Jonathan Pierce line that he said for the game, which is about 3 hours long. So if you have a spare 3 hours today, maybe I can think of worse ways to spend it. But also, interestingly, there were tournament modes inspired by early series trials, the Gauntlets, and what would later become the Pinball as well. Again, sorted by, referenced by commentary lines, which weren't used. Again, it would have been interesting to have something like the Gauntlet and Pinball referenced by video games, because we never saw it in Extreme Destruction, did we? But yeah, there was commentary lines again for that. Gauntlet events in one of the arenas. I'm not sure what that was for, but it was called Maze Mayhem, which may indicate that it was something similar to like the Labyrinth trial that we had in Series 1. But commentary lines definitely suggest that it was referencing a gauntlet trial, which just never came to be in Arenas of Destruction, unfortunately.
Yeah. Going back to what you said about Roadblock earlier, it's a bit of a shame that Roadblock never had any sort of release of any merchandise. Didn't get a toy. It wasn't in any of the games or anything.
No, I think by the time it became Beast of Bodmin, really, that was before any of the toys were coming out, DVDs, things like that.
But
really,
I think Roadblock was still mentioned in the Ultimate Guide, which was released, I think, around Series 6-ish, which was long after Roadblock had retired.
Yeah, I mean, fair play. That was, it was a Series 1 champion. I can understand why it was referenced. But with regards to, marketable merchandise, things like that, the pullback toys, mini bots. By that point, you were up to Plunderbird 5, for example, to give you an idea of roughly where we were at then. I suppose I can. It would have been nice actually to have had if there were more pullbacks, perhaps akin to how many robots BattleBots did toys for example. If there was a little classic collection whereby, you had a little Roadblock and Cassius. Not that Rex would have, I'd imagine, asked for it, but just to kind of pay homage to some of the earlier robots that were very, very much kind of the bedrock of what Robot Wars would become for years to come.
Absolutely. Speaking of stuff that was ultimately missing and we're not sure why, Extreme Destruction didn't actually have too much lost media. There might have been some missing prototypes, but yeah, as I said, that's a whole different story. But the weird thing about Extreme Destruction was, why did it never get a PlayStation 2 release? And I'm still wondering whether there was meant to be one, but it was just cancelled for whatever reason, because this was during a time when development was being super rushed, because BBC Bottled Media was going to lose the license because it was going to be handed over to Channel 5, if I remember rightly. But yeah, it was just pretty bizarre that, for a console that sold a lot more than the Xbox did back then, and said no actual game for, no Extreme Destruction release at all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe Arenas of Destruction equally on the inverse was released on Xbox either.
No, it was just PC and PS2 for Arenas of Destruction.
Yeah, and Extreme Destruction, it was released on the Game Boy Advance, but it was a totally different game. So that may well have explained something, but I'm not too sure if there was any intention for it to be exclusive to one console or the other. I'm not sure if that was necessarily a thing back then, but or at least too common, or if they would have cared that much. But yeah, it was very strange. And also in Arenas of Destruction, there were skins that you could apply to your robot. Now this was also made available in the prototypes and the build versions that you could see. There was all things that you could, very akin to the decals and things like that, you could get in Robot Arena 2. You could put all kinds of things like flames and shark teeth camouflage, from what I can see, zebra skin, tiger skin on your robot, which would have made for a kind of interesting thing other than just kind of colours, which is what we ended up getting.
Yeah. There is also one other piece of lost media that I think some people might be a bit more recognisable with when it comes to video games. As I said, Metal Mayhem was the first game released with the Robot Wars license, and it wasn't the greatest of games, to be honest, because of some weird choices among other issues. Interesting enough, on the back of the box there is actually a screenshot of Ultor in the game, and as we know, Ultor never actually featured in the final game, so whether or not it was just in a prototype or is somewhere buried within the code, we don't really know. But yeah, just another weird little choice there. I mean, they picked Crash and Nasher over, like, say, Hypnodisc among other robots.
Yeah, bold decision.
Really bizarre.
But it seems like the kind of decision where there must have been reason for it, because surely you can't just say, like, oh, let's drop Ultor. It just seems like a very, I don't know, unsubstantiated decision to make.
What would be hilarious is if Team Ultra felt it was unfair for their robot to be included and allowed another team to get their robot to be in the game instead. That would have been
like Big Brother.
Yeah.
That may well have been the case. Who knows? But it's far from the only thing that's a bit messed up in that game. I mean, Chaos 2's weapon was described as an axe, which it just wasn't.
Yeah, and you can't flip anything over.
No, so not that it would have mattered anyway. But yeah, a little bit of trivia there on Metal Mayhem.
So I believe that is all the lost media we want to talk about.
Not actually. No, it isn't, Luke, because we've actually got one little extra segment we wanted to discuss as well. So, as we know, most of the battles were edited when we saw them in broadcasted form, and so pretty much almost every single battle does have a little bit of lost media. You know, they're not uncut, and we didn't get to see them uncut, but there were some exceptions to the rule, which were, like, say, the battles that were included on the Robot Wars Ultimate Warrior, and the most bizarrely of all, in fact, was Iron's entire Series 4 campaign. We got to see their battles uncut as well. So yeah, there were actually a few.
What a treat it was.
Yeah. Iron Ore, against Mazakari and Mortis, and against Stick 2 as well. So, as I said, definitely some of the biggest gems you'll get to see online if you wanted to search up Robot Wars. But yeah, there are a few little highlights that, interestingly enough, didn't actually make it to broadcast in other battles. So I'm just going to bring a little example, and some other people can add theirs. I think it was Extreme 2 Challenge Belt, Dan Tomkia was doing incredibly well in its opening battle, flipped out Hypnodisc, and was doing really well, so Chromonaut got flipped out by Matilda. But did you know that Dan Tomkia also flipped out Smithseed? And that was an interesting little fact that I'm surprised didn't make it to broadcast.
Yeah, because it would have been the first and perhaps only instance of 3 robots being ejected from the arena in one fight. I guess. I mean, Crackers and Smash.
Yeah.
Technically. Yeah, but yeah, no, it was an interesting one because it does confirm that we, and obviously unedited versions of the fights existed and was kept, for some instances. And had we seen them, it may well have made some judges' decisions, especially in Series 4, a bit more understandable.
Yeah, for example, Dominator 2 versus Firestorm 2, that's a battle we would love to see in full.
Yeah.
As is the case for a lot of battles, really. Another interesting one to point out is that Hypnodisc actually almost lost its battle to Robogeddon. In the opening seconds, which we never got to see, Hypnodisc was stuck in reverse drive, I think it was, and Robogeddon was actually pushing its foe, not too dissimilar to TX108 doing it in Extreme 1. And then Hypnodisc broke away, and the rest is history.
God. Could you imagine a Series 3 campaign where Hypnodisc loses in round 1?
There must be an alternative universe out there where that happens, and Hypnodisc becomes
in
Series 4. Yeah.
So Hypnodisc goes into Series 4 unseeded.
101 a grand finalist. They gave Stinger a seed. I'm sure they can bullshit one for Hypnodisc.
Yeah.
I think Another one I wanted to bring up about uncut missing things from battles is it comes from Ian Gear from Team Vercingetorix, where he revealed to me in a direct message that Common Getorix in its battle with Bigger Brother for the Vengeance battle, he ended up knocking off Sir Killalot's head.
Wow. That is something I would love to see, because, as I said, I'm not sure many people were fans of Common Getorix, especially in Extreme 1 when it kept on being in fights where it shouldn't have really been. But yeah, I think a lot of people would have loved to have seen Sir Killalot be decapitated.
Yeah, and he said it was because they wanted to make Sir Killalot look invincible. Seeing his head get knocked off would just kill that, so they cut that out.
Yeah, there were 2 instances of cut parts of Gemini's fights. One of which was in Series 4, where it was fighting Tornado, and yes, it was a bit of an instance with the pit. As massive surprise, that never happened in Robot Wars at all. So it was unseasoned and televised edits. Tornado was flipped by Gemini, and Shunt came in to attack them, and Tornado actually drove into the pit as it was descending. Now the pit was actually raised to get Tornado out, apparently, with Gemini attempting to flip it out of the pit as it was raised. Tornado got out, Gemini flipped it over again, and then Tornado started to have radio reception issues, which is just very, very strange. But that's coming from Team Tornado's website, so a very reliable source on that.
Yeah. Speaking of Tornado as well, in its battle with Chaos 2, there were actually 3 different battles. I think apparently the first battle both broke down, and I'm not sure what happened in the second one. But yeah, there were actually 3 different battles.
Wall got damaged in the second one, I believe.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just a little interesting little thing as well, because as I said, we only got to see the third battle where Chaos 2 definitively beat Tornado. Another instance of this where battles were restarted, so to speak, was Mortis versus Panic Attack in the War of Independence.
Yeah, so that was aired a few times. Well, it was shot a few times, wasn't it, for different reasons?
Essentially, what people are seeing in the edited battle is actually 2 fights, because apparently Mortis beat Panic Attack in the judge's decision in the first one, which was a close battle, but the producers didn't want Mortis to win, which is a bit bizarre, because if you didn't want Mortis to progress, don't have it in the tournament. So the battle commenced again, and of course Mortis won again. And yeah, so we've got 2 competitive battles, and they were merged into one. So yeah, technically we've seen both of them happen at once.
Yeah, I mean, for all the kind of cut stuff that we saw from fights, I don't think we really ever saw again an instance where more than one fight or more than one recording of a fight was sewn together in such a way.
Exactly.
But yeah, just going back to Gemini as well, I should mention the Series 4 bit that I just mentioned was actually its melee, which also involved Caterkiller, and Razor and Gemini both progressed. Sorry, Tornado and Gemini. God, I will get there. Both progressed. Reason I mentioned Razor is because actually in its All Stars fight against Gemini again. Now, I saw quite a convincing display from Razor. It was crushing into its tyres. One of the Gemini halves, while the other one was trying to attack it. Quite a convincing Razor win. But there was a moment that was cut from the fight whereby Razor drove over the floor flipper, and now, unlike in what you saw in the reboot where the floor flipper would activate during fights on mobile robots, the classic series floor flipper did not operate like that. And it fired accidentally. It accidentally went off. They don't know the reason why, and threw Razor sideways. This is coming from the Razor team website as well, and they were then kind of Razor were kind of incapacitated to some extent, and it was a very strange end to the fight, because it was something there that Razor weren't functioning. They were struggling to self-right with the arm, and Sir Killalot then gave them a helping hand back over. But Razor was in pretty much in an immobile state. Hydraulic fluid was oozing over the floor as well, and inevitably it went down to a judge's decision. So it was scored to the point until the flipper had gone off. But I can't remember now. Did that fight end up as a judge's decision in the actual episode?
I think it did. I don't think Gemini were mobilised. Wasn't a cluster thrown in the air as well?
I believe so. But yeah, so the judge's decision that you would have seen, presumably the footage of the judges were actually judging up until that point in the fight. But obviously the editing was done in a way that made it look like the fight ended way before Razor drove over the floor flipper.
I wonder why they cut it, because that would have been an interesting little highlight, and Jonathan Pierce could have played it up saying that the arena was against Razor or something like that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you had the instance in Series 7 where the floor flipper went off on Ripper, and that stayed in.
And the floor flipper also tried to get the competitors in the All-Star fight when they were attacking the House Robots.
Oh yeah, definitely. The House Robot Rebellion as well, and then they could have bigged it up in a very similar way to how when in the very next fight actually in the All Stars where Behemoth flipped Razor over, like right before cease. They could have really played on that, but no, inevitably that's another bit of lost media that we may never see.
Speaking of things that we may never see, mainly because of the fact that apparently it was Mental versus this machine, Storm 2, as we know, had a so-called controversial Series 7 campaign. Again, as I said, controversial. As I think a lot of people realised that it probably wasn't as controversial as the team said it was. But a little interesting note about Storm 2 versus Supernova was that it was actually controversial against Supernova, not against Storm 2, because apparently from what I understand, Storm 2 was stacked on its side and Redbot tried to carry it out, and then Storm 2 was freed upside down. Supernova then started attacking it and actually immobilised Storm 2. So theoretically, Supernova should have won the championship, but for whatever reason, things changed. And Storm 2 got the win.
Well, I believe that was after Supernova had been counted out itself, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was just a bit of a messy final battle for the show, at least the classic era.
Yeah, it wasn't a great lasting impression, really.
It was a shame because it was actually a good battle, but...
Yeah, and I thought it was a good episode as well, personally.
I was just going to bring something up about the battles that got included with the Ultimate Archive Collection, the House Robot one, which was the Flipper Frenzy from Extreme 1. After the battle had finished, we actually got to see a bit of sort of the behind the scenes of Robot Wars. Like, after the battles are finished, they introduced Craig Charles to come out and say his part when the battle's done. Then there'll be another cut when they tell the Roboteers to go to the control booths, and then they'll ask the audience to cheer again to sort of hide the cuts. So I thought that was quite interesting to see a little bit of how it was filmed being included on the DVD.
Yeah, it was quite interesting being like a fly on the wall in that sense. Almost breaking the fourth wall in a sense.
Yeah, again, another hardcore fan's wet dream, just seeing everything occur.
And those battles are quite interesting because it kind of actually, shows Robot Wars, as it's happening. It's interesting to hear it without the commentary.
Yeah, you can hear the impacts of weapon on weapon destruction, I guess, and things like that. I mean, there's a lot of fights. God, cut them down more. I don't care, but there's a few fights that I really would have liked to have seen unedited.
I said, absolutely loved Hypnodisc's uncut battle with Splinter. I mean, House Robots took far too much time, but just seeing Splinter be literally just a base plate with all these electronics flying out by the end was just an incredible sight.
Yeah, that was a good choice.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen Chaos 2 Stinger.
Ooh,
there was controversy over that, wasn't there?
Because I think in the official guide for Extreme, I think the Stinger team were actually very miffed that their robot lost to Chaos 2 in that way. They claimed it was fixed. So, yeah.
You know what I'll take? I'll take extended versions of every single fight from the Series 4 semi-final episode featuring Firestorm and Dominator 2, because every fight in that was a banger, and they were all horribly cut down. So we've covered here today a broad range of lost media. If we wanted to take it even broader, we could look at stuff like potential lost dubs of Robot Wars, possibly in the case of the Science Channel's dub of Series 8. Losing that might be a good thing for Robot Wars in general. God knows there's so many UK live events we don't have. The 2004 Fighting Robots Association Championship that is available in drips and drabs. But yeah, I think we've covered a lot here today, and thank you, Space, for bringing, because I know you've done a lot of the research for these and was responsible for getting them on the Lost Media Wiki, for example.
No problem. As I said, I've absolutely enjoyed my time being here as well, and yeah, thanks everyone else for adding their parts as well. And yeah, we definitely got a few other little extra additions as well. I had no idea about the Gemini Tornado Lost Media, for example. So yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely an interesting one.
Yeah. And thank you, Jack and Taz, for your contributions.
Yeah, it's been good.
My pleasure.
And so yeah, that'll be it from us for today. I've been your host, Luke, and goodbye.
See you later.
Take care.